All right, today we're tackling a big one of the deepest tensions out there in modern society. What happens when our personal moral compass points in a totally different direction from the law? I mean, really think about that for a second. What happens when citizens deeply disagree on these really fundamental moral questions? You've got half the country saying something is a basic human right, while the other half sees it as just profoundly wrong. So, what should the law do? How can it possibly reflect the will of the people when the people are so completely divided? And you see, this boils down to two totally different ideas about what law is even for. On one side, you've got the belief that law should enforce a kind of moral truth. But on the other, the idea that law has to stay neutral, to protect our individual freedom. It forces us to ask this huge question. Is the law supposed to be a moral teacher, or is it more like a neutral referee in a very, very complicated game? Okay, so to really get a handle on this, we've got to go back in time a bit. Let's start with what you might call the classical view of law. You know, for most of history, law and morality were basically seen as the same thing. They were completely intertwined. The whole point of the law wasn't just to keep order, like, setting traffic rules. Its main job was to cultivate virtue, discourage vice, and guide everyone toward a shared idea of the good life. It was a tool for moral instruction. And this really gets to the heart of it. There's a great way to think about this. The question is not whether morality enters law. The question is whose morality. From this classical viewpoint, neutrality is impossible. It's not even a coherent idea. Think about it. Every single law is built on a set of values. A law against theft isn't just a practical rule. It's a moral statement that respecting property is good. So the idea of a value-neutral law, it just doesn't make sense. But then, things changed. Modern societies became way more diverse, right? You have all these different beliefs, different values, all living side by side. And this huge shift, well, it threw a major wrench into that classical view. This is what's known as the liberal turn. And this brought in a totally new idea, political liberalism. The thinking goes like this. In a society with all these deep moral and religious disagreements, the state has to step back. It has to separate itself from any single moral doctrine. Why? To protect everyone's individual freedom and conscience. The government's job is no longer to tell you how to live a good life, but to make sure you have the freedom to figure that out for yourself. So political liberalism basically offers this three-step solution. Step 1, acknowledge that people are always going to disagree on big moral questions. That's just a permanent part of a free society. Step 2, separate the government from any one specific moral or religious belief system. And step 3, focus on protecting basic rights and making sure the rules of the game are fair for everybody. That's the formula. Okay, so that sounds pretty good in theory, right? The neutral state. But does it actually work in practice? This is where we start to see some cracks in the foundation. Which brings us to a huge, huge question. Is true neutrality even possible? Can the government ever really be a completely impartial referee? Or does the very act of making a law, any law, mean you're already taking a moral stand, whether you want to or not? I mean, you just have to look at the issues that tear us apart to see the problem. Things like marriage, reproductive ethics, religious exemptions, or free speech. In these areas, the law has to take a stand. There's no way around it. When the law defines what marriage is, for instance, it's not just making a rule. It's making a profound statement about what marriage means. And here's the kicker. Even when the law does nothing, when it decides not to legislate on something, that's a moral choice too. To legalize an action is to legitimate it. The law is always shaping our culture, sending signals of approval or disapproval. So if you protect something as a right, you're not being neutral. You're saying it's valuable. The whole idea of neutrality starts to look like a bit of a myth. So this tension, this pull between neutrality and the common good, it's not just a standalone issue. It's actually the final piece of a much larger puzzle. It's the last of 4 huge unresolved tensions of justice that we've been looking at all season. Let's just take a quick look back. Remember when we talked about markets? We saw that tension between consent and corruption. Then we talked about merit and the tug of war between personal achievement and, well, moral luck. With membership, it was the balance between community and universal rights. And now we're ending with the law, the conflict between neutrality and the common good. You see the pattern, right? It's always a balancing act. And I think if there's one big takeaway from all of this, it's that justice isn't a destination. It's not some problem we can solve once and for all. Justice in our modern world is an ongoing practice. It's this incredibly fragile equilibrium that every single generation has to fight to maintain. So that leaves us with one last question to chew on. In a world as fragmented as ours, is a fragile balance the best we can hope for? Maybe. Maybe the goal isn't to make these tensions disappear. Maybe the real work of justice is learning how to live inside of them, together.